Okay, so really quickly, I'm Vivek Angiras, certified Scrum Trainer. I think I recognize some names here. I think some of you may have been in my CSM or CSPO class, so welcome back. It's good to have you here. And my focus is going to be that how you can use some practical tools to help your team measure performance and essentially get some better insights for productivity, right? Um, and the focus is to not think about like Scrum Master from 2020 and before that. The focus is how to prepare you for Scrum Master of 2026, the next year that you'll be stepping into. Well, all of us will be stepping into, right? So that's what our focus is going to be. Okay, so let's jump right in. So we're going to talk about four key things. Yeah. So the very first thing, why? Why do we think this is a good idea? Why metrics matter in Scrum? So we are going to talk about that. All of us, we are busy. We already have a lot of stuff to do, and now on top of that, it should be a burden. So we'll talk about that. The second, so the poll that we did, and we got some answers. We had some of you say 1 to 4, some of you said 5 to 10. But what I've realized, four metrics are the key ones that you need to move the needle. Just need four. And those four will focus on the flow, the quality, goals, and morale. So we'll spend some time on that. What are those metrics? How to track them? And it doesn't matter what tool you use; those metrics will help you everywhere. Yeah. Then we'll share some. Well, I'll share some real life examples and some of the things that have happened in my projects and what the impact. There's one project that I was working with a particular client last year. So there's an interesting quick story that I would like to share. So I'll share that. And then I'll also sort of share like a 30-day action plan, like a 30-day challenge for you, to apply these four metrics. And I'll give you a step-by-step process for that, So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about this. Okay. So why do metrics matter in Scrum? So why is it really that important? Metrics, they do get a bad rep. And the reason for that is because a lot of times they are used as weapons to blame and point fingers. You did something wrong, or they did something wrong, or, it is going to affect the performance review of someone. So, that's why sometimes something that you may have heard that, oh, the team velocity has dropped. What just happened here, right? Why did you not hit the sprint goal? So what's really going on here? So definitely it creates frustration, right? So what are some benefits? If you are actually capturing what's really going on, it is definitely going to help you make more informed decisions. So evidence-based decision making is one of the key benefits. As a Scrum Master, a lot of your job is to act as a mirror, help the team see what's really going on and help them interpret that. So that should be based on the evidence. So you have to make sure that the transparency is pretty high. Second, metrics are important because predictable delivery is one of the key things. I work with stakeholders, and one of the things that I've realized, I'm sure a lot of you do as well, given the roles that you have, Scrum Masters, project managers, program managers, implementation managers, we saw all of that. So you're working with stakeholders. And one thing I've realized while working with stakeholders, they love predictability. Even the predictable pattern of failing is valuable to them rather than a team that is highly mercurial. They are awesome and then they are down in the dumps, because that unpredictable data creates anxiety because you cannot plan anything with that, right? Third, transparency. I was talking about it. So enhanced transparency, that is certainly part of it. That definitely helps. That's why metrics are important. And overall, when the team is actually able to see the data themselves, it allows them to improve and get better based on realistic feedback. So when we are thinking about the why should we even consider this? better decision making, predictable delivery, more transparency, and team learning from it, getting feedback out of it. Yeah. Okay, now let's get to the actual metrics. I mean, there are a lot of metrics. Don't get me wrong, but is everything important? Not that much. I would say if you're a Scrum Master, this is what you should be really focused on: cycle time, escape defects, sprint goal success rate, and happiness or the overall team morale. Okay, so when you look at the flow metric to know what's the flow efficiency of the team, cycle time is sort of the king of the metric. The cycle time is how long does it take your work from start to done, when it is added to, let's say, your product backlog, or when it is added to the sprint backlog, and to actually getting it to done. Shorter the better. The less time it takes, the better. It should be that you started something and it just stays around, and then the team finishes that on the last day. So capturing and calculating cycle time is better, because shorter means that you're delivering value faster and you're learning quickly, you're learning faster. Now, the escape defects. Now, this one hurts, because now we are talking about bugs that are made into production. Because see, an escape defect is a broken promise to the customer, a promise that was not met. But here's the thing: tracking is not about blaming someone. It is about making sure that how can we prevent the next one? How can we ensure that not many defects make into production? How we can quickly capture them. So that's what the escape defects really mean. Sprint goal success rate. Okay, so now this one is actually one of my favorite ones. Are you actually achieving what you have planned for each sprint? Whatever the objective is. And this is really an important one, because what I've realized, a lot of times the team morale, it tanks because they are not able to meet the sprint goal, even though they are working really hard. So you have to kind of really think about that one. And I'll give you an example of that a little bit later. And the final is, is your team overall happy? Is the team morale positive, negative, neutral? What's the team feeling? How they're doing. So you have to also do a little gut check over there as well. So notice the pattern here. What's the pattern? Flow, quality, goals, and the team morale. So these are the 4 things you're trying to assess. And this is essentially what is going to cover what really matters. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Now, if you're looking purely from a meetings perspective, the 4 Scrum meetings: daily Scrum, sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospective. How can you sort of look at this? Because see, making metrics visible throughout your Scrum events should be something that you should strive for. Not only the retrospective, that, hey, retro is the time to talk about how's the team doing. Yes, but make sure the metrics are visible throughout, everywhere. That should be your game plan. So for example, let's talk about daily Scrum. So imagine when you're in daily Scrum and you notice the cycle time is trending up, which means something that used to take a day or a couple of days, now it's taking 3 days or 4 days or 5 days. So the question is, are we seeing any bottlenecks? Because no one's talking about impediments, but the time is going up. So boom, now what has really happened is you're focused on what's really happening here. Looks like there are no impediments, but looks like things are taking longer. The cycle time is rising up. Remember, shorter the better. So if it is taking longer, then there's something else that we need to kind of figure out what's really going on here. Okay, when we look at sprint review. Now, sprint review, it's not just for demoing features, what you have built, but it is also to talk about the success rate. That, okay, this is the 4th time we have met our sprint goal. I mean, that's the story that stakeholders would remember, that, this team is consistent. They've been doing this again and again and again and on the dot. And, they've been pretty good with that. Then retrospective. Now, we were talking about the retrospective. This is definitely where you do a deep dive. That's the whole point. If you guys remember, I was talking about the escape defects, So if that drops, let's say by 40% after the team started to do some pair work, people are shadowing each other. Now that's the data to prove what is working, So you can definitely talk about that, and that can definitely help the team making sure we gain some process efficiencies there. Ultimately, you have to kind of remember this. Transparency is the key. Half your job as a Scrum Master is to keep things visible. What kind of visibility? Okay, people having conversations that are visible to each other, like the whole team, do they know what's really going on? The second is the process and the data visibility. And the third is the product, what you're processing, So it's important that you're focused on the overall visibility. And that is definitely going to help creating that transparency using the data. Yeah. Okay. Now, yeah, so this is something that we hear all the time. Velocity, velocity, velocity. Let's track it. Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with that. I also track velocity, but this is not your golden metric. There's no one golden metric. I mean, shouldn't be using any one single metric in isolation, but velocity does not equate with performance. Okay. Velocity measures output. It just shows you how much have you completed. We had 5 things, we completed 4, so the velocity is 4. We had 5, we finished 5, velocity is 5. But is it the right stuff? Is it actually valuable? Is your team healthy? Velocity tells none of that, right? So it's important that we understand this. There's a difference between output versus outcome. Velocity measures the output. We have to also think about the outcome along with looking at the velocity. So it's really important, because I'm sure you have also seen this, but I've seen a lot of teams, what they do is they inflate their velocity by breaking down stories further and further and further, because guess what? Now you can add more points, and more points means better velocity. Yeah, it does not work like that. But this is something that you get to see a lot of teams do. I've seen teams burn out chasing velocity targets. It's like measuring, let's say you're going on a road trip and you're just measuring how fast you drove, from point A to point B, and completely missing whether you actually enjoyed the journey, or even for that matter, did you even arrive at the right destination? So it's important you're focused on that. Also, burn downs. Teams, they just talk about burn downs, sprint burn down, release burn down. I think that's okay, but it's important that we, again, are not just looking at the output focused metrics. We have to understand this. Unless it is tied to an outcome, something like customer value, net promoter scores, or let's say revenue leakage, customer retention, gaining new subscribers. These are more valuable things that you should start to think about. So output versus outcome. So output is just an indicator. You have to kind of think about this from the perspective of what the actual goal is to get to the outcome. Okay, now another thing I see is a lot of times managers do that, a lot of times Scrum Masters do that. When there's fluctuation in velocity, people start to panic. Oh, our velocity is supposed to be, let's say, 20 or 25. But this time around, it is 18 or it is 17. What really happened here? What did we do wrong? Yeah, we should not consider that every dip is a crisis. See, we do complex work, and sometimes there are going to be challenges. People get sick, there are holidays, complexity arises. So if there's a dip, which is an anomaly, it's okay, move on. I mean, talk about that in the retro, but don't worry too much about it. But yeah, if it is happening again and again, maybe 3 or 4 times, yeah, that's definitely something to talk about. But don't worry too much about it. And ultimately, I was talking about this, pair velocity with outcome. output versus outcome. Yeah. So when you apply both, then I think you get something of more value. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So I was talking about sprint goal, right? The success rate. So what I realized over the years is the sprint goal success rate is one of the most powerful one and is often overlooked. A lot of times I work with teams where either they don't have a clear sprint goal, they just have that, hey, we have 5 stories that we want to finish, and that's our sprint goal. Yeah, that just tells you a bunch of work, but not what exactly those stories are for. So what I've realized, if a team is able to meet their sprint goals about 8 to 9 times out of the 10 times, like you have 10 sprints, they are able to meet their sprint goal in 8 sprints. That's a pretty good team. That's a highly predictable team. And I mean, that's something that if I'm a product owner, that helps me plan and make projections. If I'm a stakeholder, I would definitely, be a bit more comfortable with the team that I think they'll be able to meet their released commitments. That's definitely. Now, why is it important? Because it forces you to have real sprint goals. Like I was saying, that not just complete 5 stories, but okay, something like enable customers to collaborate using sticky notes. Okay, I mean, that's what we are looking for. That's the objective, that we want to make sure that our customers, they are able to collaborate using sticky notes, not just finish 5 stories. Okay, those 5 stories might be the features that help us collaborate, but the focus should be on why are we trying to do this. Okay, now what matters, we have to make sure that we are focused on the value delivery outcomes, just beyond not just looking at the story points, because I mean, story points are just a means to an end, not an end itself. And if you're not using story points, that's even better. I would just like to just count the number of items. That's a better thing. Now, how to track it? It's simple. At the end of the sprint, just have a quick conversation about, did we meet the sprint goal? Yes or no? Yes, great. No. Okay, let's talk about it. Is it that the sprint goal was not clear? Was it open-ended? Okay, we want stakeholders to be able to collaborate using sticky notes. Great. Or was it we want stakeholders to collaborate on a dashboard? Okay, that's a rather vague one. On a dashboard, there can be many ways to collaborate. Sticky notes may be one of them. So it's important that you're creating some sort of boundaries there. Also, make sure you are keeping in mind some red flags. If you're consistently not able to meet the sprint goal, if you are noticing that you are not even able to meet the sprint goal 6 or 7 times out of 10 times, maybe either you're overcommitting, or the sprint goal is not clear, or maybe there are too many interruptions, too many stakeholders coming and saying, hey, by the way, I have something else. See, the metric won't tell you why, but it is definitely going to tell you where to look. And that's one of the key things. It allows you a chance to do some investigation. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so this is what I was briefly referring to earlier. So I worked with this client last year, and this was supposed to be a highly performing team. And what I was told as I started, that there was a consistent increase in the velocity in the last 6 months, and it increased to 50%, which was, from the outside, looked pretty exciting. Okay, 50%, that's that's a steep rise. But when I investigated further, I realized that the cycle time, the time it takes for someone to start working on something and the time it takes to finish that, it just exploded. It was taking too long. Stories that used to take 3 days, now they were taking the whole sprint, 9 or 10 days. Because the team, they were rushing, they were cutting corners. There was a lot of technical debt, and it definitely also affects the team morale, because I realized they were working nights and weekends. So that 50% increase was not just efficiency, it was unsustainable over time that was disguised as productivity. So you have to kind of think about this. The result of that was the turnover. It's definitely demotivating when about 70% of the team leaves. People just kept on leaving in the 9 months, and it left the rest of the team shell shocked. Now, I had gone through this a while ago as well. This was around COVID time, so to 2020, 2021. And it definitely creates a lot of hesitation for anyone that, oh, we don't want to join that team. They'll work you to death. See, customers are happy, stakeholders are happy initially, looking at the numbers, but no one wants to work there because you're working nights and weekends, and then over a period of time you start to see that the gains that you see on the metrics are not the real gains. You still have a lot of bugs and defects, and overall productivity is pretty low. So it's important that you are not tracking isolated metrics. You are tracking multiple metrics. If velocity goes up, but cycle time also goes up, and the team morale goes down, that's a clear red alert. Something is wrong. That's why you track all the 4 metrics together. Okay. Now, let's talk about predictability. How can you forecast with confidence? Because as I said earlier, if you remember, stakeholders, they love predictability. More than speed of delivery, more than features, they want to know when are you going to deliver something? So having a stable velocity, I did not say high velocity. I said stable velocity. Having a stable velocity is more important. Consistency is better than fast and chaotic. A team that delivers about 30 points every sprint, that is more valuable than a team that swings between 25 to 60. Because 25 to 60 is pretty broad. That's highly unpredictable team. Now, another one is the stability of the scope. Now, this one is hard. I'm sure all of you have had this experience where the stakeholders would come in mid-sprint and would say, hey, by the way, I have something else which is more important. They would change their mind mid-sprint. But tracking this is helpful because then you can at least have a conversation. We've had scope change 7 of the last 10 times. Can we discuss this? Because if this keeps on happening, the team morale goes down and they are not focused on planning. And they start to put buffers when they are estimating. So it's just a lose-lose proposition. Quality metrics, low defects means fewer surprises, fewer fire drills, fewer all hands on deck, war room-like situations. I'm sure some of you have also gone through that. Definitely not fun. Predictability loves quality. When on your team, when someone leaves and someone new joins, it affects the team stability. And if the team is not stable, the team is not predictable. So stable teams is equal to predictable teams. This kind of go hand in hand. So it's important that when you're thinking about making a projection, when you're thinking of forecasting, that all these 5 work together. You can actually forecast with confidence. Imagine having this conversation with a stakeholder. Based on our data, this will be done in 6 weeks. And actually being right about that. That'll be awesome. Yeah. Okay, so I do have some practical tips here as well. Okay, so first of all, how do we avoid micromanagement with metrics? Because it's very easy to fall into this trap. Because the big fear is that won't this lead to micromanagement? This is something that's a very genuine fear. If you get it wrong, they can be used as weapons. That you did something wrong, or she did something wrong, or they did something wrong. But if you use them right, then they can be an excellent tool. So you have to kind of think about three things: trust and empower, focus on trends, and the team ownership. So trust and empower means metrics are to spark the conversation, not to use this for blaming someone. Because people are smart. If you start to use it for blaming someone, then people would start to game the metrics. Then it does not help. Focus on trends. Like I said earlier, remember, one bad sprint, not a problem. 3 bad sprints, okay, now we need to investigate. Hey, what's really going on? Don't react to every blip in velocity. But if you are seeing a consistent drop, certainly need to talk about it. Or consistent not being able to meet the sprint goal, definitely need to talk about it. But don't worry about each and every sprint and meeting everything all the time. You'll just drive everyone crazy, including yourself. Yeah. And the secret sauce is, I've realized, if you let the team actually track their own metrics, they would use them as their improvement goals themselves. The teams then ends up becoming more self-managing. And I've realized this, rather than the Scrum Master always saying, okay, these are the 4 things we need to track. A lot of time you can use this as an opportunity for discussion in the retrospective that, hey, team, which metric would we like to focus on in the next sprint? And, that you can do a quick voting on that, and the team can propose something, and then that can be the metric that the team sets its goal to the next time. See, the golden rule here is metrics should illuminate system improvements, not to blame individual. When the teams, they own their metrics, they drive their own continuous improvement. So there's no micromanagement that's required, because they're not sort of like, oh, the Scrum Master is telling us to measure this. It's like, no, this is something that is going to help us. Okay, now how do we actually practically talk about metrics without getting fired? So this is about the real talk, having tough conversations. So there are some phrases that I've realized can be pretty useful, rather than telling that, okay, you're not doing this well, or this is where you are lacking. So one of the phrases that I like to use is, hey, here's what the data is telling us. It's beautiful, right? I mean, you're not saying you have failed. You're saying, let's look at this information. See, it's hard to argue with the data. Another phrase. One possible explanation is, not saying that this is the problem, but could it be? You're inviting a hypothesis. You're not delivering any verdicts, So it definitely makes people less defensive when you are actually making sure that, you're sharing your perspective, and you're also inviting other hypotheses that what do others think about that. Another one is to say that, hey, can we partner to test that? Can we shift to solving this jointly? And that's even more powerful, because what you have really done is you have turned a potential confrontation into collaboration. So you have to kind of think about this. How do you frame this? So framing requires making sure you're using the context, data, and the interpretation. So something like this, if you look at the before and after snippet, before you've missed the target, after, okay, here's what the data is telling us. Can we explore causes together? You're focused on how to solve a problem rather than who might have caused it. That can be a one-on-one conversation at some point. But if you really want to get to a solution, then focus on what the data is telling you. So the partnership is really important. Try these phrases and see how that works. It has worked quite well for me. So you may want to test it out. Yeah. Okay. So finally, what you may want to think about. So you may want to think about your next challenge. So break down how to use these 4 metrics in the next 4 weeks. So the first week, track the core metrics. So we're talking about the cycle time, sprint goal success. So focus on that, just the basic stuff. No analysis yet, just data collection. Yeah. Second week, now think about the overall team happiness. Every Friday, maybe ask the team, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how's your week? That's it. Takes a couple of minutes, but you'll start to see there are trends that are coming up fast. So those trends are going to be useful. The third week, now that's where it starts to kind of get interesting, because now you're trying to spark some curiosity. Display one chart, maybe could be on your team wiki space or your Confluence page or whatever, you use, whatever digital collaboration tool you use. Just put that data on a screen or somewhere. Don't say anything. Just put the data up. It could be maybe the escape defects. It could be the overall team happiness. Could be cycle time. It could be any of the metrics. And let's see what the team says about it. You don't say anything. Let the team take a look at that. I guarantee someone will say something about it, and that's your opening. And now comes the big thing, the final week. Now, can you share these metrics with your stakeholders? Can you have those conversations? That's the key thing. Show the data, show your trends, and show that you're making evidence-based decisions. So ultimately, start to build on this and start to see how you can compound going from 1 week to the second week to the third week and so on. That's sort of the whole idea. Okay, so finally, I would just like to make you just think of one thing. See, metrics are not about control. Metrics are about clarity. It's not about judgment. It's about improvement. What can we improve? So you have to kind of constantly think about this. And just to sort of recap on the 4 metrics: cycle time, shorter the better; escape defects, lesser bugs that make to production, the better; sprint goal success rate, how consistently are we meeting sprint goal; and overall team happiness. That's all you need to transform and lead your teams. That's what you should be really thinking about. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to give you guys some time here to ask any questions based on what I presented or based on metrics, and then we'll do a quick wrap after that. So if you have a question, you can ask me.
Vivek, who are the right one to set up the sprint goals? Sometimes it's product owner, sometimes it's team. So is it together?
See, yeah, it's together, but definitely this is going to be the product owner who comes with the objective in the mind. That, okay, I'm thinking that you want to have a dashboard where my customers can collaborate, right? So I'm coming with an open-ended objective in my mind. But if you really think about it, a dashboard can have 20 ways for the customers to collaborate, and the team may not be able to achieve all 20 of them. So the conversation that happens between the product owner and the team members, and facilitated by the Scrum Master, is going to create some boundary around that. That, okay, we want the customers to be able to collaborate on a dashboard, but in this sprint, our focus is just on collaboration using sticky notes. That's it. So you have created some boundary to that objective, which was earlier broad. Now it's more specific. So product owner comes with the objective and collaborates with the team to craft and refine and create a sprint goal. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good question, because sometimes there's confusion about that. That is it just the product owner brings it, or is it just the team, they would like to just work on whatever they would like to work on? No, it's a combination, but it's led by the PO. Okay. Any other question? Okay, so if there are no questions, that's okay. So I think my team, I think they'll take maybe a couple of days, and whenever, or maybe it could be slightly more than that, but you'll have access to the recording and the deck that we were looking at here. So you can definitely check out. Now, I think some of you already connected with me on LinkedIn. If not, if you would like to, you can just I can share my profile link here. So if you have further questions, you can definitely reach out, and I'll be happy to respond. Or you can email me at vivek@simpliaxis.com. that works as well. So if you have any further questions about this, you can either reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me on vivek@simpliaxis.com. And for the content that we used here and the Zoom recording, my team will reach out to you. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day. The rest of it, I think some of you are just, the morning is starting, some of you are in the midday, and some of you it's evening. So wherever you are, have a happy Saturday. So thank you and take care. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vivek. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.